All right, let's get started here. I am using Dr. Mark Kovac's 8-stage model because it really helps with going step by step by step. And it starts with the absolute basics, and that is the grip and the stance, and then the ball toss release. So very obviously you have the right grip, the continental grip. Your stance initially is good, meaning that you have your right slightly staggered behind your left, and your toe looks to the side here between the net post and the baseline. So that's all good. What you do notice though, once you get into your motion, you're stepping forward. See right here. And that will get us into a little bit of a problem in the loading stage, stage 3. Before that though, I do want to point out that you're doing a really good job releasing the ball. You have a fairly straight arm, almost straight, so we don't have to really pick on that at all. Let me scroll this forward a little bit more. There we go. It's pointing towards the net post and or the doubles alley there, so that's exactly how we want it. Love that you have the ball very lightly in your hands and you're releasing it at the appropriate time. So I think right about there, it has left your hand, and that is right where it needs to be between the nose and the top of the head. And I think that gives you a very consistent, at least from what I saw in the footage, toss. So those are good. Grip, ball release, and as I said, initial stance. But the stepping forward now, what that leads to in the third stage, in the loading stage, means that almost all your body weight is on your front leg when it should be on your back leg, and your back hip should drop a little bit because you want to load into that leg that then helps you to drive up and out. So let's look at Roger Federer because he also has a platform stance, and I have really good footage there. So let's look at it. So if I'm letting Roger run here, compare that, stance, very similar. Ball release, a little tougher to see from our angle, but also between the eyes and top of the head. And this is the loading position. And you do see that obviously his legs, his feet don't move anymore. And from the initial position, again, we're looking a little bit from the top. So if we were standing right either behind him or right next to him, we would see it even more pronounced. But look at where the right hip is, this level. And now he's loading. This is where the power is coming from. And noticeably, if you look at the engagement of the muscles here, that's what we can see with the human eye there, is he has his body weight on his back leg. Because you're moving there, in this position now, you have your body weight on your front leg. And if we compare where your hip was, about here, so let's use that little peak here of the pants as our reference point. Now in your loading position, it has shifted forward quite significantly, but it hasn't really lowered as much. And that is what you want to achieve in this loading position. Other than that, you see that you have a shoulder over shoulder position. And that is exactly what you want. And ideally, you would want to have a little bit more of a hip over hip. And again, we don't see it quite as clearly here with Roger, but it is this hip over hip. So you're not quite getting into your ideal loading position. So the first tip would be, can you eliminate that little step forward? Because obviously that is when you start to shift your weight forward. So let's continue here. This is the loading position. The next stage now is called the cocking position. So the tip of the racket points down, butt cap, inside of the elbow, face, and the chest bone all look up. And you're getting into this position as well. Right here. All these markers you hit, but you're now noticing a very distinct difference. Your arm is still up, and basically what you want to achieve is a reverse shoulder over shoulder position. So before it was the hitting arm lower than the tossing arm shoulder, and you had that here as well, but you're now basically preventing yourself from really accelerating up, because ideally you would be in almost a cartwheel position. I don't know if you ever did cartwheels as kids, when you were a kid, but basically as you're driving around here with this side of the body, the left side of the body pulls down so that you're ending up in a reverse shoulder over shoulder, and you're not getting into this position, right? So as you're coming up almost to contact point, you're still level here. That is something that you can work on by just simply throwing a ball. And this time it's perfectly fine if you're pitching the ball. Notice what your left arm is doing, because I'm fairly sure that when you're throwing the ball, your left arm will tuck in front of your body, just like it does here for Roger. And then it most likely will shoot back as a means of balancing all of this. Now, the next position here that ideally you want to get into, we're going back to the toss a little bit. We could argue that your toss is maybe a little too far back. Let me see if I can position that really in the middle here of the ball, about there. That's a generous way to do this. So you notice now that the ball basically, if you were to let it come down, would land almost on the baseline. And you're accelerating up. I like that. But you're barely clearing the baseline here. So ideally you would want to place that ball a little bit further in front so that you land inside the baseline here a little bit more. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to, toss it 2-3 feet or something. That's way too much. But ideally where your foot is right here, if you could bring it down here, that would allow you to also accelerate into the ball a little bit better. And we'd also get into this almost jackknife position here. And that's actually what you want, this angle between the upper body and the lower body. You do not want to necessarily make contact with the ball directly above your shoulder, because that puts a lot of strain on your shoulder. Then if we continue to look further with your serve, notice here, I love that the side with which you hit is pointing to us, which means you do get pronation on your forearm here and an internal shoulder rotation. So a long axis shoulder rotation is what that's called. And then you follow through to your left. Right, so I think it's the three things there. I think though the first one, that where it all starts, of course, is that you keep your foot still right here. And we'll see that in the other pictures here in a little bit as well. See there? So I don't care, honestly, about the foot fault. You might play people, though, who get nitpicky about that, and then they get into your head. So that's definitely one thing that you want to work on to prevent that. But again, you're shifting forward already, and you're not getting in your proper loading position. Here again, you're not getting into the cartwheel. So think about if you were to do a cartwheel right here, this left hand would pull down as your right comes up. And of course, that then helps you lift the entire body up and out. And the loading coming from the back leg then, of course, is the driver for the pace of the serve. So ideally here, tuck it in. A little bit further in front the toss as well, because you also again see that here, your toss, or the contact point, sorry, is directly above your shoulder. Good, landing on your left foot here, right foot comes back, right leg comes back to balance. Nice, look at the next one. A little less of the foot movement. Still not getting, obviously, into the shoulder over shoulder, the reverse part. I would work, of course, because we do work in those stages, stance. So number one, stance. Keep foot still, which then leads to loading off the back leg. Drive down into the ground with your back leg. And I'm also going to put a video link into the email where you can check out a couple of exercises that you can do that to get the feel a little bit more. Then number two, you want to get into the reverse shoulder over shoulder. So you want to tuck the left arm. And of course, before that happens, before you do get into the loading position of also ever so slightly, number three, toss in front a little bit more.